Councillor John Marshall.
Mr. Mayor, I first met Margaret Thatcher in the spring of 1979, when on a Friday evening I was invited as the MEP candidate to come with my wife to meet her after a very hard day which started in Knutsford and finished with a surgery in Finchley. When we went in, she turned to my wife and said, "It's a long time since I last saw you." And that reminded me that she either had a very good memory or she had a very good staff, but whichever it was, she was thoroughly professional. Some of those who've spoken about Margaret Thatcher in the past few days have ignored the legacy she received from governments of both colours in 1979. The late 1960s and the 1970s were a miserable time in the history of this country. Harold Wilson tried to reform trade union law. He produced a document in place of strife, which created so much strife in the Labour Party that it was immediately disowned. Ted Heath tried to reform industrial relations, passed an Act of Parliament that was stillborn as soon as it was passed. Michael Foot in the Wilson and Callaghan government had a different strategy. He gave the trade unions whatever they wanted. And the result was that inflation in this country reached 27%. And when Hugh Fraser was standing in the Conservative leadership election, he thought of campaigning that he would get inflation down to the Latin American level. We had Red Robber, who was going around having everyone out whenever he wanted to disrupt British Labour. And British industry, steel, shipbuilding, motors, coal and textiles were all in terminal decline. What Margaret Thatcher did was to restore hope where there was despair. She learned from the mistakes of her predecessor. She reformed trade union laws successfully. She recognised that confiscatory taxation acted as a disincentive to everyone and merely encouraged people to indulge in tax spending. She privatised industry so that it could become more efficient. I will always remember two of her speeches. I was in Brighton in 1984 when the bomb went off, and we got a phone call at 7:30 in the morning telling us what had happened. And they went on to say, Margaret Thatcher will be on parade at 9:15, and so will you. And there she was, immaculate, not a hair out of place. And later that afternoon, she delivered a first-rate speech of defiance, saying that a Democratic Party's conference was not going to be stopped at the behest of terrorists. And I also remember a speech she gave in November 1990. But after the first ballot, Neil Kinnock put down a motion of no confidence in the government, thinking it would cause a bit of fun. But Margaret Thatcher had to speak against that motion on the Thursday, by which time she announced she wasn't going to seek re-election as leader of the Conservative Party. She spoke with such vim and enthusiasm, and at one point when Mr. Skinner tried to interrupt her and started heckling, she turned to him and said, "I'm enjoying this." Despite all the inner turmoil, she gave such a brilliant speech that some of those who dared to vote against her said to themselves, "What the hell have we done?" But I also like to speak very briefly about her personal touches. Although she was called the Iron Lady, she was the Iron Lady with a very soft heart. She kept to the New Testament philosophy, charity wanted not itself. When the Wesley Chapel wanted some money for some refurbishment, she said, "Fine, I will provide the new communion rail, provided that no one is told." On one occasion, a constituent came to her and said, "I gave Barnet Council £100 in cash. They don't realise that they got it from me." And she was so aghast, wouldn't happen now, would it, Mr. Travers? She was so aghast that she told one of her party workers, "You've got to take £100 and give it to that family and say it came from a friend." She didn't want anyone to know from whom it had come. I also am a member of the 1983 election, when Roger Bowden was helping her 7 days a week. On the Saturday, his daughter was there, and Margaret Thatcher turned to someone and said, "That poor girl, this is the only way she can see her father. Would someone please go and buy her some sweets so that she knows that we appreciate everything he is doing?" On the day Sidney Chapman's brother died, a Mark Lennox boy came to me and said, "I'm coming at the behest of the Prime Minister." I said, "What the hell's this all about?" And he said, "Sidney's brother's died. The Prime Minister's writing to him tonight, but she wants to have quite the right words. Can you tell me how close Sidney was to his brother? I don't believe there are many other Prime Ministers who have done that." Tomorrow, the country is paying tribute to someone who was an excellent constituency member of Parliament, who was a world statesman and who raised the prestige of this country. May she rest in peace.